That's the sound. All right, welcome to Demo Day. Take it off, Carl.
All right. Hey, everyone. So I'm going to be demoing a number of things today. I will start with some new source models that we have. And first off, let me say that it was an absolute joy being able to use the Dagster asset factories that we have and getting all these things to run and being able to test them locally. I was basically onboarding several data sets a day and getting everything going. And it got to the point where I could probably get a new one going in like an hour and a half or so, start to finish. And that's like, configuring it, testing it, doing the first job to dump the data, and then building the staging and seed models. So it was really amazing seeing a process that used to take, I don't know, days or something, now be something which anyone can do pretty quickly. So there's a few new sources here. We have continued to build out what we have in DeFi Llama. So we now have a metadata about every single protocol that is in DeFi Llama. That's useful should we ever want to index the universe of DeFi Llama protocols. So I'll show a bit of that. Another data set that we now have is Open Labels Initiative. So this basically is a decentralized source of labels. So basically taking an address, it could be a contract, it could be a wallet, it could be an EOA, it could be a deployer and stuff like that, and labeling them. So they've been good data community partners. They use OSO as OSS directory as the owner project for many of their labels. But in a kind of a nice collaboration, some of the data sets that we used to have to kind of insert into SQL as literals, like the 4337 data, now they are getting those included as attestations. And so we can just grab the latest data from them, and then we don't need to maintain that. They are maintaining it for us, which is nice. So that's another data set that is here. I think, oh, and then the third one, also another kind of fun little small one, is a site called Chainlist, which basically has the chain ID and the name and other metadata. It has RPCs and stuff like that if we wanted it for every EVM compatible chain. So again, like 3 nice public goods, fully open data sets that are very useful, so that we don't have to hard code any assumptions about chain IDs, about 4337 addresses. What's up, Ray?
This is awesome. 2 questions. One is, could you give a really 3 questions. One is, are all 3 of these automatically indexed, or are any of these static snapshots?
They're all automatically being indexed. I think they run on monthly jobs.
Great. What are the factories for each of these? I'm curious, which ones did you use for each?
So Chainlist is literally just pulling a JSON. It's like a very simple, I guess, Javi, which one was this one that we're using? I actually forget.
The archive factory, I think.
Oh, yes, the archive factory. That's the one. Yeah. The DeFi Llama protocols, this is the REST API one. Or sorry, the protocol metadata is the REST API. And then the Open Labels is the static one, but it's using the Parquet format.
So is when you say static, you mean
the archive factory using the Parquet? Yeah.
Sorry, it's the archive factory using Parquet. So,
using Parquet format,
so
yes.
you don't have, there's no manual step where you have to upload Parquet to our GCS or anything like that.
There is nothing manual.
Wonderful. Yeah. Amazing. That's lovely. Second question is, have you created the data portal entries for any of these yet? Because effectively, all of these are on BigQuery now.
They're all on BigQuery. I have not created the data portal entries, partly because with DeFi Llama, I just want to make sure that they are having some discussions with Optimism right now about how best to do attribution. And with OLI, I thought we could do some kind of bigger release because we are so hand in hand with them that it would seem that we should kind of get some attention to the data sets being there.
Yeah, I mean, I think this actually gives us more, juice to share with the Google Web3 team as well. So once the data portal entries are there, I think that actually is very compelling thing to share. If you could let me know when you have that.
Okay, cool. Yes, I definitely need to do that. The other thing that I can just quickly show, just a couple of the downstream models that come from this. So here is a very nice one that just lets you grab the chain list data, so you can see the chain ID and the chain list names. Again, this may seem like a small thing, but Reuven and I used to kind of manually hard code all of these in SQL. So now we can point to this source and just do a join. And anytime a new chain appears, we magically get the name. We will still do kind of our own mapping back to our OSS directory names, but that is now a seed file that we can just maintain in the CSV. All the hard-coded stuff is gone. Here's a preview of the protocol data. If we want to kind of index the universe of DeFi Llama stuff, here's all the other metadata that comes along with it. So they have like Twitter and token addresses, symbols, etc. So if we want to integrate with CoinGecko, we can grab the symbol of their token. We can see if the artifact, or we can see if the project exists because we have other things like its Twitter or its token address or a website already in OSS directory. We can pull logos, a lot of nice little building blocks that exist in this data set. And then finally, this is just using an example of OLI. So again, OLI is kind of loosely compatible with OSO already because what they call an owner project refers to an OSO slug. But then we also have addresses and different types of labels that can be applied to them. So there's a couple of sub-models that I've created which will look at 4337 specific addresses or deployers or EOAs and stuff like that. So their data set is much smaller than ours, but it's a nice complement. And there are some chains like Scroll that we don't have that they have done a decent job of covering. In any case, it's there, and we can point people to it. So that was all the new data set hookup. Yeah. And again, the tools work magically. I don't think I encountered any issues apart from just like data quality checks, but it was very, very simple for me. Great. For those of you who were looking, who've kind of rebased recently, I made some huge changes to a lot of the kind of underlying artifact and project logic. There's just some messiness that we wanted to clean up for a while, and I kept having lots of issues that kind of came down to there being some difficulty in maintaining our different kind of artifact and project parsing logic. A lot of that again was kind of hard coded into the SQL. So the main changes here is that we now have some macros for artifact parsing. In most cases, you can just pass a URL, or in the case of a blockchain artifact, it's the address, and then we'll work out everything else. It will kind of compose the different fields that are required to create a artifact entry in any artifact by project model. We could use the same thing for the events model. So in DeFi Llama, for example, you just give it a URL, and it will pull out the artifact name, the namespace, the artifact type, etc. Same thing for GitHub logic as well. So it will, if given an org, it will figure that out. If given a repo, it'll figure that out. We have the logic for handling social handles like Twitter and Farcaster, websites, etc. Yeah, Ray.
Curious how much of this was vibe coded versus hand coded SQL glot.
And vibe coders do not like SQL glot. So I would get it started, and then I would have to literally, do everything myself.
Oh man. Okay. Well.
Yeah.
One of these days, I think we can write a tool to help making the SQL glot writing a little bit easier.
Yeah. Like it would get the hang of it, but I would literally have to handhold every single one of these. I probably lost 2 hours because I said, create these 6 macros, and it just did not work. And I had to literally go one by one. Yeah. Unfortunately, that was the only thing that I tried to vibe code. Everything else like literally required just going through things one by one and replacing the logic. So what does this look like? If you take a model like int artifacts by project in open source OSS directory, let me just show the full code here. It's actually pretty different. Again, probably no one except for Reuven remembers this. These labels are vibe coded, so I did get it to separate the concerns nicely. But now you just have all this kind of crazy logic here. So you basically just have this kind of cross-join lateral format, and it takes the artifact and it gives you everything that you need. So yeah, little joys of refactoring. But now everything is there. We have the same logic for OP Atlas. You can see how everything just comes through, and it's very nice, very kind of easy to see how everything comes together. If you want to see what it looked like before, yeah. Well, anyway, you probably don't, but it was pretty messy. The other big thing, which maybe I'll show some use cases of. Oh, sorry. Yeah, question.
Yeah, this is really interesting, and I mean, thank you for doing this. I know it's like a kind of a pain in the ass now that we have so much, and risky because we have so much. But I'm curious in the over engineering, under engineering retro. Did we do like we threw this all together just quickly, right? Back in the DBT days, and then we translated it quickly in the SQL Mesh days. And would you have done anything differently? Like, is there any of this that you think we should have done upfront, or is refactoring the right approach in retrospect?
Given that this was, I don't know, probably all in, maybe 10 hours of refactoring work, that's pretty manageable. I didn't, and it was also just very good to kick the tires and make sure that everything we did made sense and I could rebuild it. I did a lot of testing. I probably spent most of my time just testing to make sure that there wasn't any integrity issues. So I think it worked. I think yeah, I wouldn't have done anything differently from, the initial porting over to SQL Mesh, having some messiness be there. And then I'm glad we did it now, because if we think about onboarding new product sources, this gets really difficult to maintain. There are a lot of weird issues that I was encountering with the OP Atlas data, and now it's literally a one-to-one match, which is great. The one other thing that I want to do, so there was a lot of work that I refactored around the contracts model. I think that was previously. We do have this other one that I want to clean up as well, which is this. It's kind of our contract discovery model. So this is where Runa was trying to implement some recursive logic, which didn't work. But basically, we have a way of saying, okay, if it's a deployer, then get all of the contracts that it's deployed. Check to see if any of those are factories. If they're factories, also get all of the deployments from those factories. So I'm guessing this is going to be a snippet that will be used again and again for other product sources. So I'd like to turn this into macro, and then it can be like an optional setting that you have. But right now, it kind of exists as a separate model, and we have the same thing for the OSS directory source.
Yeah, I guess just to sort of piggyback onto what you said, Carl, I don't know that we could have done some of this. The artifacts by we started at a clean slate when we wrote it into DBT, I guess,
Right.
and that seemed pretty good. But then, yeah, I think, just iteratively, we've been adding to that. So I don't know that we could have done that much differently.
No.
I guess the one thing we could have done is fix it when we ported things to SQL Mesh. But the hard part there was we already had questions on,
There was so much technical risk already at that point.
Exactly.
That's
way too risky. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think I just wanted a sanity check based
Oh,
on
yeah.
your experience, and I'm glad you said the answer that you said. It basically speaks to our ethos, which is go move faster. Everybody move faster. We can refactor things later, right? But don't get stuck thinking, oh, I need the best answer, or I mean, this is certainly mostly true for the more junior people on the team. If you're waiting around asking for permission, you're waiting too long. You should be just running ahead, and refactors are usually easy. There are very few refactors that are hard that are one-way doors.
Yes.
Mostly user-facing things. So yeah. But other than that, it's go move faster. Yeah. Don't wait.
Yeah. One question is, when you were doing the integrity checks of the data, how did you do that actually, I guess?
Yeah, I took a lot of snapshots of what the data looked like ahead of time, the project and certain metrics and stuff like that.
So plotting and stuff was pretty important for that. Okay.
Yeah, I have some local tests that I run. I kind of got back into configuring some of the tests that run in production. I did just find that so it was so frustrating because we have our seed data and then we have to configure like test data in a similar way.
Yeah.
We can make that improved.
Yeah. I guess the one problem with the unit tests are really unit tests in SQL Mesh. So they only test a single model. But because some of our things like really do depend on each other, there's no good downstream. There's no good way to do downstream testing right now. Yeah, I mean, SQL Mesh has this concept that you can diff the data warehouses, but it's fairly expensive, So yeah, so and it's not something we expose in our Dagster setup. So
Is it time to revisit Reki?
It might be. I mean, I did this over the weekend partly because if I messed anything up, then it was unlikely.
This is exactly the pain point Reki is meant to solve.
Yeah.
They're just, we should double check if they have SQL Mesh support yet, which I know they've been working on.
The other thing that Ruben was saying why we couldn't have done this before that I forgot to mention is because we hadn't indexed the universe. So I think the fact that we now index the universe, we used to have this weird circular logic where we would say, is it an OSS directory? If so, pull the repos. If so, look up the artifact ID once we've pulled the repo and so on. And now that we have indexed the universe, we can basically take all the repos that exist. We can grab like the artifact source ID from that. We can get the URL and other things from that. And then we can have a separate model, which is just based on the ones that we have indexed from our own OSS directory source. And we can now union the two of those, or we can join them and see, okay, of the ones that we have, how many are actually, what percent have we put into OSS directory of the total repos that exist in the universe? I haven't run that calculation. I'm guessing it's like 1 or 2%, but maybe less. But we can do that now.
Cool.
And then the other thing which is still in flight is cleaning up the package data. So we have all of that. We've indexed the universe there as well. I now want to be able to auto detect packages based on repos that are owned by a project. All right, so that's all on the modeling side. Hopefully, no impact on anyone else's operations is good. It shouldn't touch any of the MART models. It should just all be kind of things upstream of that. I'm going to go very quickly through the dashboards. There's some cool dashboards. This is actually the main thing that I was working on last week. But we have 3 dashboards that the OP Labs team are using. General pattern that I've been doing is creating tabs that show the different functionality and then putting a tab that shows the source code with a bit of explanation for how to get started and how to get an API key and stuff like that. So in all of these, the idea is that someone else could copy this into Colab or into a notebook and get things to run. And in general, these are pretty lean and efficient. Most of the heavy work is done in the pipeline, and you're just kind of doing some enrichment after the fact. A lot of these ones are working with spreadsheets as well, but it's 200 lines of code or something, which is pretty short for a notebook typically. Yeah.
I think one of the things that I struggle with Hex, like Hex is a great user interface, but I'm view only mode, which means that like I don't have a Hex account and I can't find these things very easily. Like how is the layman in this team supposed to find? You have like a bunch of Hex notebooks that are really valuable now at this point that are used strategically. I can't log in because I'm too cheap to pay for it because I don't actually want to use it. How do I find these?
Yeah, I should just create a list of Hex notebooks or something that are not in development, that are like production ready or something like that, stable. The interface that I have is nice. I can see all of these things, right? But you can't see that.
This is all in the Kariba Labs team space.
Yeah.
So if we weren't too cheap to pay for it, then I would have that same view basically.
Yeah. And you get metrics on how many people are using it and stuff like that. So people are coming.
And the reason why they're in Hex and not in Colab is because you do want people using the dashboard interface, right? And
Hex is good for that.
Yeah. That's fine. Totally makes sense. I'm just trying to get a better sense of like how to find these things in the future.
Yep. Yep.
And then out of like, if you had a ballpark, what percentage of these queries, not that you could express, but that you would prefer to express in semantic query builder land? What percent ballpark right now?
They all have the same pattern, which is one of these things. So there's like a definition of a set of constants, right? And then I'm literally doing my own, Portman's version of a semantic query generator and saying, okay, here's all the definitions that I want. Here's the keys. It turns that into some crazy array, and then it pipes it in here and does one of these. Or sorry, this is the one. So again and again, I am pulling a set of metrics, set of projects, and trying to roll it up. Here, some of the logic is being done, in the data frame, but this type of thing is very common.
Man, I gotta say, Carl, in the last 2 years, you've really grown as a Python coder. I'm impressed.
Thank you. All right, let me show you this dashboard because this is cool. What this does here is basically take all the projects that have received any grant funding from Optimism. There's more than, actually doesn't show it here. Yeah, 500 governance fund grants. This is coming from the sheet data. 800 or so retro funding grants that are going to on-chain builders. Here's like a summary view of all of it. And we basically have some definitions. These are very work in progress. We're going to refine them, of different categories of maturity. So a blue chip builder is, as the name implies, a team that is like already pretty scaled, has a lot of activity, more than 100 million in TVL, or more than 1 million contract calls. And then you have a couple other ones. And so you can basically see projects that have started very recently and immediately gotten very, very big. Ones that used to be big but have gotten smaller. Ones that are kind of up and down, et cetera. And of course, you can then double click on any particular project and see how much they've received in grants. You can get the link to every single grant that they've received over time. These are all retro funding ones, which are the same link. And then, of course, we have our time series metrics that come in. You can select any of the metrics that you care about. You can plot that. And you can pull a set of all the metrics per year. And this is why it earned that category. So this is, as Sarah from Optimism calls it, this is God mode. It's like the thing that they've always wanted to be able to look up for any single project. And they literally wanted to go in and now, have specific activation campaigns based on these categories. So very, very cool, very, very useful. And they also want to understand, how much funding have they received and is it the right amount? So they want to understand how big the developer team is and how many users they have, all that type of stuff. Yes.
Not now, but the next time we meet for the offsite, it would be really cool for you to walk through like how this fits into Sarah's workflow or Jonas's workflow or Sochi's workflow. Like actually walk through the business impact of something like this as opposed to how it's technically made. I think the rest of the team would really value that.
100%. Okay. I'm going to do the next one very, very quickly. So this is the futarchy measurement. Should I explain what futarchy is? Do people know what futarchy is? So basically, they created a prediction market to identify whether experts from the Grants Council were better at identifying which projects would increase TVL on the superchain. And they compared that to a prediction market where basically the wisdom of the crowds were betting with play money, in this case, about which ones they thought would do the best. And so they basically had a set of projects. The Grants Council and the futarchy team chose the top 5. Those top 5 received a grant of 100,000 OP, and then they monitored them over the course of 3 months or so to see which ones did the best. Butter, which is the one that administered the futarchy, they kind of did these daily snapshots of how much TVL each project had. You can kind of see some of these here. So here's the grants council cohort. Here's the project. Here's the increase in TVL. And then they would compare that to the futarchy selector projects. They were basically taking logs of this every day. They wanted us to come in and consolidate the results. So you can see that here. Overall, the futarchy cohort had a TVL of 126 million at the end of the program, which is a lift of 30 million. They did perform better than the grants council cohort. And actually, the grants council cohort performed worse than even the non-selected cohort. And you can see overall the impact across all of this. Here's the math for the formulas. You can basically see the breakdown of which projects contributed the most. In the case of the futarchy cohort, they had one good project. The rest is basically the same, but they had one good project, and the grants council had one bad project. So not a very meaningful result, but they know the shortcomings of the experiment. Then you can kind of come in here and see the details about each project cohort, the delta, how that was calculated. Again, you can get the metadata if you want. And we also have the ability to deep dive on any protocol, see how the TVL happened across the whole period. This is going to be extended, so this will run, I think, until 30 days out to see which ones retain TVL the most. But basically, the outcome was resolved, and the futarchy projects did perform better based on the experiment design. Super simple. Again, this is really, I don't know, 15, a very small number of lines of code and queries to get this going, and most of it's just in the dashboarding. And we also do connect to a spreadsheet here. Last up, this is the season 7 impact analysis. So Evan teed up this work from season 6, and then last week there was a flurry of activity, conveniently while Evan was out, to get this going for season 7. And they just kind of published the results, but basically there were 42 grants, of which 18 went to TVL projects. And the complicated thing here is that there was a lot of commingling of incentive programs that were happening at the same time. So we built this way of adjusting for that. So you have the total TVL inflows over the period, and then there's a attribution factor which is applied. So in some cases, like Morpho, there was a lot of other stuff happening. The grant that they got was whatever that is, $250,000, and the starting TVL was $500 million. So it'd be crazy to credit all of the changes to this small grant. So there's some logic for figuring out how much attribution it should get. You can see some examples of that over here. Again, also coming in from a sheet. And then we have the same nice visuals that show the program start, and this will continue out. And yeah, here's the overall impact number that they care about, which is the lift in TVL. So a pretty good last 3 months. TVL went up by 1.5 billion. A lot of incentive programs that were happening. Most of it was really on Base and Unichain now. And we can see specifically which projects had the most impact. So yeah, that shipped. It's up on the forum, and that is being used to determine budgets for season 8. Any questions?
Awesome. I would love to deep dive into this more. When we have more time. But this is a cool overview.
All right, I'm going to sign off and switch over to my phone to continue on. Thanks, everyone.
All right. I'll do a quick overview of OSO chat and how we're thinking about pricing. So this is new-ish. We've had OSO chat for some time now, trying to refine the user interface to start exposing this to organizations. So one thing that's new is we have this new dashboard. We need to hire a designer. We'll continue iterating on. We have a dashboard. We didn't used to have a dashboard. I think one of the things that we'll want to keep in mind is that in the past we never really pushed anybody towards our web app in any way. And I'm hoping that will change slowly over time. In the past, pretty much the only thing we asked people to do was to set up API keys, right? Which is now hidden under organization settings. Increasingly, as we expose more surfaces here, in the past, we've been very haphazard with our front end. We'll want to be like more and more careful over time, but not yet. So yeah, now we can create new SQL queries, new chats. These are both saved instances. So if you come into here, you'll see here's like a SQL query that we had saved. You can rename this up top. It gets reflected in the sidebar. And yeah, we can basically save queries now. And it's saved on run. So this will be useful. We can slowly improve this experience over time. But you have a SQL level, and then you also have a chat level. So for those who don't know, we are working on an LLM-based chat system to kind of help answer basic questions. You know, once you click onto one of these, you'll see a chat history. Right now, I think we're still not too happy with our agent performance, right? So I don't know that we actually expect people to be using this yet. After this call, maybe Ruben, Javi, Carl, and I can sit down and like enumerate what are the things that are still missing before we expect people to be using this more regularly. But same thing here. It does have, you know, it is generating responses. It's just like not the level of quality that we're quite happy with yet. Same thing here where you can rename and whatnot. And the delete button's over here, which we might want to move in the future. But anyway, that is the chat. So it's kind of what you would expect. One of the things that is nice is that all of this is in Plasmic. So we can start tweaking it with the designer once we hire one. Kind of how I imagine this in the future. So we are in mid-flight setting up like Stripe billing. The Stripe billing is set up with the nonprofit, so the revenue is going to be recognized into the nonprofit. And so for the most part, like this is what we've kind of always had: the community tier. We have an API. We have, you know, the Discord. It's all open source. We have these community data sets that we're still growing on. But in reality, like, you know, capacity isn't unlimited, right? So we're going to want to start establishing some kind of quota system, which Javi has been working on in the credit system. And all of this has been, you know, funded by our grants so far. And then this is the other end of the spectrum, right? We've only really had these two tiers in the past. This is like your Optimisms and Protocol Labs of the world who will pay, you know, for all the other things, including unlimited credits and new data sets that are only relevant to their system, data models that are relevant to their system, how to use these insights for strategic decision making, like the stuff that Carl has just showed. All of that is basically an enterprise tier. And then I think what we want to start experimenting with is stuff in the intermediate tiers, right? So basically the main difference between starter and pro is whether you have access to the agent is really the big unlock. Everything else has to do with, you know, as you pay more, the unit pricing gets cheaper. But otherwise, it's kind of what you would expect. And starter is what we hope, you know, people that end up using us as a freelance more regularly will start to contribute. And again, you know, it goes into the nonprofit. It serves the same mission. It's just trying to do things that are at the more intermediate level outside of our typical enterprise engagements. Any feedback? Any thoughts? Does this make sense to people?
I think
when it comes to the, go ahead, Ikara.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I know these are still under development, but I would try to make the starter would be the one that you want to be more self-service, right? Where we are hands off. I would try to make it the most accessible price as possible, so we don't end up with like thinking that, oh, these like it's a too big of a bump for anyone to want to use it by themselves, you know.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think the numbers are still things that we're experimenting with. So this is definitely not set in stone. But yeah, I agree with that.
Do we see, like, obviously right now you can use the same API key for access through GraphQL as well as through PyOSO. But because one is going through ClickHouse and the other one is going through Trino, it's gonna probably have different kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
Do we have any kind of preference or thought about whether pricing should be segregated based on how you access it?
So yes, we already have that. It will be.
Cool.
I mean, if you want to get into the details, basically every API endpoint will have different like credit rates, right? Of like how much it costs to call that API. And so /chat is a different unit rate than /SQL, which is what powers PyOSO, which is a different unit rate than /GraphQL, which is what powers the GraphQL API. Cool. All right. Off to you, Ruben.
Cool. All right. Let's take a look. So this sprint was kind of a lot of bug fixing for me. And I didn't really get them all because if you try to use the agent right now, it might work, but running evals right now does not work properly. But one of the things that we did do, a couple of the asks that we had, like for ourselves, was to be able to get both the results and the SQL query kind of eval within the Phoenix UI, so that we can, as humans, better look at what the actual results are, but then also have the evals run against SQL. So there are a couple limitations that we ended up finding with Phoenix. And so to work around that, one of the things I did was take advantage of the workflow system inside of Llama Index. So actually, and then added some special syntactic sugar to it to make it a little bit easier for ourselves. So let me share a window here. All right. So yeah, so everything now, so some of this is still sort of continuously being refactored to like include this instead as the main like entry point instead of the agents themselves. Agents will just be like you'll be able to turn any basic agent into like a very, very simple workflow. And that is fairly consistent with the way the Llama Index works anyway. It's just that, we have some special sauce here so that we can use them for evals. So let me show you kind of the basic thought here. So what I've done is I've created this base class that you can call or you can inherit from. It's called a mixable workflow. And one of the reasons why I did it this way is that a lot of our workflows, they follow very, very similar patterns. And even the way that I'm thinking about how we would create like new different like workflows for text to SQL or et cetera. Basically, you do some kind of text to SQL generation, then you grab either a data frame or some other SQL result, and then you try and synthesize a response from that. So rather than have all of that be something that you always have to recreate, now you can just reuse a bunch of these tools that do all of that. So maybe you only want to look at the text to SQL part of it, and maybe you only want to look at the response synthesis. So all of those things are now split. And so how do we do that? So we take advantage of this thing called a workflow in Llama Index. I added some additional meta class like magic just to make some things a little bit nicer. So now you can define what equate to essentially just mix-ins. So let's say, let's look at this PyOSO workflow. So this one, right, you would take a text-to-SQL generation event. So everything is event-driven. So you just tell, you use, and this is all very basic Llama index, you define a step inside your class, and you define the event that you are expecting. So this one is expecting the text-to-SQL event, and then you do stuff with it. And so this one will, execute the query and then return the SQL result, which can be either, a data frame or like a set of rows, like a list of rows is one of the other options that we have, which mostly came from, which maybe a bit of legacy for some of the stuff that we have. I think we'll move entirely to data frames, but for now, that's the way it is. And then if you instead wanted to do the MCP database workflow, which is why we have this legacy support here for right now, like this was quick enough to have both modeled in here as opposed to refactor the whole thing. You can actually switch out, like when you create a workflow, like what you would like instead. So let me show you actually what the text-to-SQL workflow looks like, and then we can talk about why this is all useful. So, so the text-to-SQL workflow has both the MCP database workflow and the response synthesis mix-in. So those are two mix-in classes that you put together, and then all you have to do in order to create this text-to-SQL workflow is create a text-to-SQL generation event. So, and then, yeah, here we're actually generating the SQL. So that's what this query engine tool call is. And then you define that you actually need this as a resource. So this is my magic here. So you, this is more like how we're used to Dagster. So basically for each Dagster asset, right, you define what are the resources I need. And then this will automatically fill all of those things in. So, and then from the SQL results, you want to return some specific summary, and then you stop, right? Yeah, like I decoupled these things here so that you can choose to maybe do something different with the SQL result. I don't know. Maybe you can change that, but yeah, this is all you need to do for this specific one. Is a very basic thing, but let's say that you wanted to, in the case of say the semantic agent, I want to do this workflow where I have a sort of really good exceptions so that we recreate this text-to-SQL. So instead of just returning a text-to-SQL generation event, I might instead also return an error or something, like well-written exception, so that I could keep reprocessing this with the agent, and or some other kind of thing. And then at the very end of that, I would do a text-to-SQL generation event when all of that is successfully completed. And so one of the reasons why we want to do this is each event returned actually can be recorded. So and that's useful in order to get this UI and or evals on each of these steps. So one of the cool mix-ins that you can do is you can have this eval workflow, which is actually how the new text-to-SQL eval works. So instead of actually doing any you don't actually have to think about this. This specific thing can be mixed in at runtime during the experiment. So let me show you that really quick. So the experiment, slightly different, than you probably noticed, Evan. I know we were working on this a bunch together, but now you have this experiment runner for reasons because of Phoenix bug stuff. I actually had to create my own experiment runner, which I think is the cause for things breaking right now. But yeah, I'll get to that in a bit. But the experiment runner runs through each of these steps, collects all of them, and then allows us to return a very specific result to Phoenix. But then also, when we're looking at the results, we get the entire history of the workflow. That's what this eval workflow is. And so at each step of the workflow, we can choose to run a specific eval. So for these text to SQL generation events, we run maybe one eval. And then for the SQL result events, maybe we run a different eval. And that's exactly what we're doing here. We're actually, when we're post-processing, we're collecting all of that into this example result, which is something that, you know, an abstraction that Evan, you created. And it allows us to take a look at, you know, all of the things, like the collection of all the things that happened. So the expected SQL result, the agent's response, the actual SQL query, whether or not it was valid SQL, et cetera. So we can run some of this all at once without having to, one, rerun all of the queries on the data warehouse, which is what we were doing previously. Every time we run some of these evals, if it needed that, it had to run all of those over and over again. So we simplified that. So there's some caching. Oh, there's a handhold. Oh no. Yeah. So and then yeah, the SQL generation versus the SQL response, we couldn't get those both in the same place, but now we can. And then the reason why we have the experiment runner is at the very end, you know, what is actually sent to Phoenix as the final result in the to display, we can also customize that. So so right now it's supposed to send the response, and then like once I can get this working, it'll send the response and then concatenate the SQL query underneath that as well. So, but yeah, that is a mouthful, but yeah, this, and you know, some of this again was some mani magic, but I think it allows us to get really deep evaluations of our agent without having to rely on using the UI within Phoenix to like look through each of the traces specifically. We can actually programmatically do some of that beforehand.
Can you show what it looks like in Phoenix?
I can't. Or well, I can show maybe something. Let me see. Hold on. I'm gonna check Phoenix right now. Sorry, you can't see my screen, but I am double checking this really quick that there maybe was a successful run somewhere. Yeah, it's, oh shoot. So when I ran this on my local machine, I accidentally overwrote what was previously there, which had a working result, and that is now gone. So unfortunately, yeah, I can't actually show any of that yet. There's a bug here, and I will find it. So yeah.
Okay, cool. Any other questions?
Cool.
All right. Javi, you want to show your credit thing?
Yes, of course. Well, hello everyone. I want to. I actually need to restart Chrome because of the sharing thingy. So give me 1 second. Sorry about that.
Oh yeah, he normally uses Safari, doesn't he?
Have you wired in the semantic stuff into this workflow pattern yet, or is that
not yet? But that should be easy enough. It's just I just got to get this bug. I don't know what's going on right now. So yeah.
Do you have a sense of like, yeah, if you could break down? Oh, Javi, why don't you go?
Hello. Yes. So can you guys see my screen? Yes, you should. Yeah. So this is mainly the PR which I've been working on regarding the user credits. It's 4176. When we did the first iteration of this user credit system, the credits were tied to the user. And we actually started using this system for some time until we had to write it again and tie it to organizations, which actually added some operational complexity because there were already people with credits that were tied to them. Organizations were created and didn't have the fields. So we had to write a few migrations and change how the API roads worked. This PR is actually big, but mainly it migrates all the credits, generates the types, and changes some stuff in the routes to be able to keep track of this usage of the credits regarding organizations. I want to show how it works. So basically, if we go here and we log in, it's still hidden under this like billing page, which super soon will migrate it to its spot in the settings page. And as you can see here, I have my organization, I have my credits, and I do have this drop-down menu in which I can choose my organization. So now, when we are actually buying credits, we are going to be buying credits for this organization. Regarding what you were saying earlier in Sprint, Ray, regarding, for example, allowing someone to add the credits, let's say, for example, to Optimism, we could actually add here maybe like an admin role or something that has access to organizations and can bypass this Stripe checkout. That's one way that we could do it. So yeah, the flow is as follows. You basically copy one of these credit cards in development, not in production. Production, this doesn't work. We go here to processing. We put our email. Let's say this, and we put one of whatever. Oh yeah, this makes sense. And I want to show something cool, and it is that now, when we pay and we go back, state is actually hydrated back. It takes some time. Should be hydrated back. One second. Testing in demo. I love this. Let me check. So we go here. So as you can see here now, for example, this is the OSO organization. We do have a lot of people using the credits. Let me test really quick. Nothing broke. So we go here, we go back, and this should load back. Yes. Okay. Well, demo hiccups. Yeah. So basically, we're now able to buy these credits regarding organization, and you can choose organization you wanna buy the credits for, and everything is plumbed. And you can see here all of the attempts from the transactions that went through, yeah, mainly that's it. Also during like this sprint, I've done a lot of plumbing, fixed a lot of bugs in quite a few places. So yeah, this is the only visual thing that I have to show for this one. One thing though that I want to tell people when using Supabase, we have a really a way of doing this Supabase migration that's like really our way of doing it. There's like some rough edges sometimes. So my recommendation is always to sync on people if you want to do one of these migrations, to ask what the state is, and to try to squash all the migrations as soon as possible in order to not block people, so that we can move with the most speed possible, use the local test and double check everything's working. Yeah, mainly that's what I wanted to share.
Are we not running migrations in CI? Is it manual right now?
No, I mean, I'm curious when you say we're doing it our way, if there is a better way, because as far as I'm aware, this is just like how Supabase works, is it's a mess, right? So
yep.
Part of the challenge is like, personally, maybe you should tell me that I shouldn't do this, but I prefer not to use migrations. I prefer to just do it in the UI and call it a day.
Yeah. I don't know why there's something about writing this SQL manually that I kind of like. I think it's I think it's a nice way of doing it. I don't like actually using the UI. I like writing my migrations by myself, but I think it's a matter of preference. At the end of the day, let's just div, squash, and push.
Like for me, like especially with like row level security related stuff, like the thing that I actually care about is the code. So I'm like trying to get the feature working, and then I'm like fiddling with things in the Supabase UI until like the feature works, and then I push that. The migration system is really clunky for that kind of fiddling, because there's no up and down like you would expect in type ORM. So you're constantly like, you'd be constantly writing new migration files and pushing them up and like fiddling with things. I don't know. I just find that really clunky. I'm curious if people have a better approach.
Yeah, when I write migrations, I just keep it locally, and yeah, since there's no up and down, we need to keep running DB resets locally to rerun the migration, basically.
Yeah, okay. So if you're using local Supabase, that would make sense.
Yeah.
Maybe we should have a better local setup, because I don't think we have populated any Supabase seed data, so that that might make it better and faster to test with. So
Yeah, I would suggest we do that. Yeah, because I could maybe limit some of the.
The setup is pretty, like, after I reset, the setup is pretty okay, because we've created a test Google key, like Google auth key, so I can just log into my account and it will create a new account for me, like every time I reset. So just re-logging with the Google auth, and I'm back with a new organization. So it's pretty like fast to reset. I guess I need to redo like all the DB state that I wanted. For example, if you wanted to have a specific chat, you need to recreate it, right?
Oh yeah, it would be nice, I guess, if we had some starting point, even if it's just in like object, like some kind of. Are we using an ORM for Supabase, or is it just straight into? Like,
no, it's
raw.
their client. Yeah.
Supabase is kind of their own ORM, right? Because they have their own code gen utilities to generate TypeScript types based on every table. So every table is an object.
I see. Understood. Okay.
But yeah, since the only way it's DB reset, it would be nice if there was just a DB, just the migration, right? The last migration, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we need to reset the entire DB to test locally. So yeah, maybe Ray, for you, if you set up Supabase locally, you can use the local dashboard to set up everything, and then you can create the migration file and push it to code. So we keep all in code, and then we can add the push only to the CD step.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. Cool. All right. Right on time. Thanks, everyone.
Cool.
Thank you. See you around.
Thanks.
Ciao, ciao.